the previous videos, we mentioned about the items to be included in the final account. First of all, what is the final account? The final account is produced by the architect and quantity surveyor after the practical completions of the work in order to conclude the final figures that the employer will need to pay to the contractor. This is very important as it involves the monetary matters. Now, within this final account, these are the items to be included in the final account, such as the adjustment made to the contract sum, the amount to which the architect considers that the contractor is entitled to, as well as there are omissions and substitutions of the prime cost sum, of the related profit provided by the contractors in the contract, also the amount payable by the employer to the nominated subcontractor and nominated supplier, as well as the adjustments of the provisional sum. Now we see there are some adjustments in terms of the contract sum. If you look carefully the previous clauses, there are some circumstances that the contract sum may be adjusted. Now in these videos, we're going to discuss about the cases where the contract sum may be adjusted. Before that, maybe let us first establish what is the contract sum. You will see the contract sum in the Article of Agreement, specifically under the Article 2 contract sum. The Article of Agreement looks something like this. Under the Article 2, there should be contract sum to be specifically specified. This contract sum is the price agreed with the contractor upon entering into the contract. Both the employer and the contractor agree with the price, and this price here has already taken into the considerations in terms of the quality and the quantities of the wood as per specified in the contract bills. You know that PEN contract is by default a lump sum contract. Even though it is a lump sum contract, it doesn't mean that the contract sum here cannot be adjusted. The lump sum here, it would be on basis of the details given in the contract bill. Therefore, this contract sum is not a fixed price here, especially when there is any items within the work here is not in accordance to the contract bill eventually. Quoting from clause 13 from the PEN contract, it is said that the contract sum should be fixed except provisions of the contract. But you know that the contract sum here is inclusive of those provisions. So ultimately, you will expect some adjustment to the final figure of this contract sum. The main point here is the contract sum is a price agreed between the contractors and the employer for the entire project. This is a lump sum project, but the price as per specified in the contract sum is not fixed due to the variations in terms of the provisions as a result of the potential changes in terms of the quantities, qualities, or the scope of the work even, which deviates slightly from the contract bills. At least we have a guidance in terms of the contract sum. After the adjustment, the variation should not be significant, as the majority part of the work are able to be grabbed by these contract bills, and therefore you will expect that the final figure here should be more or less plus minus from the initial agreed price with the contractor. Now let us proceed with our discussions in terms of the adjustment to the contract sum. These are the areas where the contract sum may be adjusted. First is about the variations. The relevant details you may refer to clause 11. You know that these variations is actually a modifications of the design, quality and quantity of the work, which was not initially in the contract bills. Since the relevant word is required by the employer, and those word was not initially counted in the contract, adjustment may be made to the contract sum. If you refer to the videos that we have discussed previously on clause 11, we know that there are two types of the variations. One is claimable under the provisional sum. Another is claimable not under the provisional sum. For the variations which is claimable to the provisional sum, there are some rules of valuations. These rules of valuations has been made transparent to the contractors and the employer on basis of the guidance as per the price and the rate which was initially agreed in the contract when there are similar characters and similar natures of the works, so that the contractor can charge reasonably to the employer without taking advantage over the employer. In our previous videos, we also work out a flowchart here to simplify what is stated in terms of the rules of valuations for the variations. For more detail, you may refer to the videos. Another type of variations is when it is claimable but not under the provisional sum. This will be the additional expenses to the contract. The reason being here is there are additional scope of work which was not initially known during formations of the contract. In this case, this will be totally new expenses to the employer. With that, the contractor will have to make known to the architect and the employer regarding the estimated expenses, seek consent from the employer before proceeding the work, and then after completing the variation works, the employer will need to pay to the contractors for the work done. Because of this type of expenses, the contract sum now is adjusted. When come to the variations, be it under the provisional sum or not under the provisional sum, the final figure of this contract sum shall be changed. If it is under the provisional sum, changes are made under the provisions. If it is not under the provisional sum, it will be additional costs added onto the contract sum. Next, we talk about the fluctuations. This is mainly refers to the cost of the material due to the inflations. You know that a project can stretch over several years. Whichever price and rate being proposed may be obsolete. Especially such degree of inflations is beyond foreseen during the formations of the contract. The contractor may negotiate with the employer for reasonable adjustment in terms of the contract sum. By right, it is a lump sum contract. The inflation should have already been anticipated. The employers has the right not to entertain the request for the adjustments of the contract sum due to the inflation. But you know that under some circumstances, when the fluctuations is ridiculously high, this may lead to consequences that the contractor cannot complete the work. At the end of the day, both sides will lose. Therefore, it will be up to the wisdom of the employer and the contractor to negotiate out in terms of the degree of adjustment as a result of the fluctuations. Next is about the prime cost sum. The prime cost sum is related to the cost due to the work or services done by the nominated subcontractor, and also due to the materials and goods supplied by the nominated supplier. These nominated subcontractors and the nominated suppliers are the person nominated by the employer, assisting the contractor to carry out his work. There is no contractual relationship between the employer and the NSC and also the nominated supplier. The contractual relationship, it will be between the contractors and the nominated subcontractor, and also between the contractors and the nominated supplier. The relevant costs related to the nominated subcontractors and nominated supplier shall be under the prime cost sum. Should any adjustment in terms of the cost here may lead to adjustments to the prime cost sum, ultimately it shall make adjustments to the contract sum. Next, it will be the provisional sum. This sum is estimated at the stage of tendering. The reason being here is there are certain scope of work or the quantity that cannot be clearly determined at the stage of formations of the contract. With that, based on the experience of the contractor, a price is estimated, and we will expect that the final quantity or the final figures are to be confirmed after the relevant work has been completed. The contractor should be able to claim whichever amount of work that he have executed. For the work not being executed, the contractor shall not be entitled of any payment. So at the end of the day, we will foresee non-confirmations in terms of the final figures here. It is purely an estimated number as far as the contract sum concerned. The final figure will only be confirmed after the work has been completed. Next is about the statutory fees. This may include the fees, levy and charges as specified in clause 4, and also the royalties, intellectual properties right as in the clause 7. Although it is mentioned here, is allowed for the adjustments of the contract sum. If you read the clauses in the PAN contract, it is by default deemed that the relevant costs should have already been incorporated during the tendering process. That means the contractor should have already anticipated a price under this statutory fee during the formations of the contract. By right, this statutory fee should be claimable. Either it is already incorporated before the formations of the contract, or if there is any new regulations applied, those fees should be adjustable to the contract sum. Next, it will be the costs related to the inspections and testing, as well as the ratifications. You know that somewhere in between during the executions of the work, the architect may request to do some inspections and testing. Some of the work may has already been covered up. Under the request of the architect, the relevant work will need to be opened up and carry out some testing. Some of the testing may be destructive. For example, do some coring in order to acquire the samples of concrete. After done the inspection and testing, ratifications will be required. Now the relevant cost here shall be claimable, and therefore adjustment to the contract sum is allowed. However, this is provided that the work is in accordance to the contract. In the case that the inspections and the testing done found that the work is not in accordance to the contract, now the relevant costs will have to be fully paid by the contractor. and no adjustment to the contract sum is allowed. Or in the case that the contractors have a bad reputations or track record of some part of the works which has already been proven not meeting the requirements as per in the contract. As a precautions, the subsequent works which reasonably been doubted that may also be affected due to the substandard work. The inspections and testing was being called out. Now the responsibility is due to the contractor. The relevant cost is not claimable, and therefore the contract sum cannot be adjusted. So when talk about the costs to be claimed related to the inspection and testing as well as the ratifications, it will need to be proven that the contractor carried out the work in accordance to the contract, meeting the quality and the quantities of the works. Next one is the protective works during the suspensions period. You know that the suspensions of the work here can be due to two main reasons. The first one is when the employer do not pay the contractors for the work that is being done. Now this is the fault of the employer, which is not the fault of the contractor. Therefore, for whichever work that has already been done, the contractor may suspend the work, leave it there, but properly protected until the employer pay the contractor the relevant amount for the work that has already been completed. You know that the protective work incurred costs, and this cost shall be charged to the employer. Therefore, adjustment to the contract sum is allowed. Another situations where the suspension of work can occur, it is when the architect or the consultant withdraw themselves from the project, not having supervised by the architect and the consultant. The project cannot proceed. That will be a compulsory suspension of the work, and this is not the fault of the contractor. With that, adjustment to the contract sum is allowed. The last item, it will be the losses and expenses, which is caused by the matters affecting the regular process of the work. The relevant information can be found in clause 24. Simply said, these loss and expenses are suffered by the contractor, which is not due to the problem of the contractor. As a result, the contractor shall be entitled for the payment related to the losses and expenses here.